So Ryan, thank you for joining me here. You are, let's see. Well, instead of me telling you what you are, do you want to just give me some background on you and like your development career and stuff like that?
Sure. So right now, I run a training business with Michael Jackson, training teams and the public on how to use React. Um, and then in our spare time, it's not spare time, I guess, when we're not traveling and running workshops, we're working on open source stuff. Um, and some of that I hope to show off. There's some new stuff that we're working on that I hope to show off at the conference. Um, yeah, and then before that, I was at a company called Instructure. It's a startup in Utah. Um, just went public last November. They sell just online learning tools. So they have a learning management system. If you've been in college recently, you've possibly used it. It's called Canvas. And then before that, I worked at a handful of agencies and did some freelance. And then before that, I sold life insurance.
Yeah, you have kind of a what I would consider to be a unique path into software. Do you want to talk about how, I mean, you were that wasn't your career, right? You were doing something else for a career and then you just kind of happened onto it. Do you want to talk about how that happened?
Yeah, so I did web stuff as a teenager. I'm 35, and so when I was a teenager, it was the web for the public was pretty new. Like, and I remember in middle school, just me and two of my friends had email addresses, and everyone else made fun of us like we were crazy computer geeks or something for having an email address. Um, and we'd connect to Doom with our modems and play Doom against each other, and it was awesome. Um, and then my dad invested in what do they call those? An ISP, an internet service provider. Remember, they're all like these little local ones that you'd sign up for.
Hmm.
They didn't come through the big telecom companies. Yeah, my dad knew a guy who started an ISP and he invested in it. And then that got me interested in building websites because everyone got their own little homepage. Like, you had an ISP and you'd go to whatever.net slash, then you had the tilde and then your username, and you
Sure.
could upload stuff there. So I started screwing around with the web. They eventually hired me to build websites for clients there. But that was, we didn't have JavaScript. We didn't have CSS. We just had a bunch of funny HTML tags to change the font and stuff like that. So I got involved with the web really early. I was invited to the was it Macromedia? Shockwave Flash beta before Adobe owned it. And so I got my hands on Flash before it was ever released and screwed around with that. I won some sort of Microsoft website award for my homepage.
What?
And
Do,
they gave
do you
me
like have that website anywhere? I would love to
no.
see
Oh, it was
it.
awful. It was hilarious. It like had pictures of me wakeboarding and then like the ramblings of a 15-year-old's political views. And but it was pretty cool. I utilized a bunch of Photoshop effects and made a cool little menu thing. And um, anyway, I won some sort of award from Microsoft. There were only 10 websites that got it, and they gave us $1,000 shopping spree from the Microsoft Web Store.
Hmm.
Um, so I looked there, and there was nothing that I really wanted to buy. So I got a C++ book. I learned C++ in 20 days because I was like, oh, maybe I should learn how to program. And then I got 9 of those bubble keyboards. You remember those? I guess they still have them, but it was like the original Microsoft Natural keyboard. And then I sold eight of them to people for like $60-$70 a piece, and then just pocketed the money. Um, and then I cracked open the C++ book and got through the first lesson to make a little calculator or something, and it was awesome. And then I got to the second lesson, and when I look back on it now, I think I realized that they had a bug in the actual code that was in the lesson,
Hmm.
and I couldn't figure out how to get this program to run. And I'd look at my code and I'd look at the code they told me to write. I just kept going back and forth, and I was writing it exactly like they told me to, and it
Hmm.
wouldn't work. And so I just gave up and never attempted to program for another, I don't know, 10, 11 years or something.
You
Um,
just like stopped
yeah, I was
completely?
like, oh, programming's not for me. I don't get this.
Even the web stuff too?
Well, no, well, that wasn't programming really yet. That was just like
Huh.
How good are you with tables
Yeah.
and Photoshop? I mean, it was mostly Photoshop. It was almost completely a design thing at that point.
Hmm.
Um, and then I remember when Internet Explorer 4, or was it 3, launched with some CSS support, the like original CSS support, and that was pretty cool. And then that was kind of it. I'm LDS or Mormon. I was a Mormon missionary for 2 years in Boston. You don't get a computer when you're a missionary. You just go around and bug people to join your church. And when I got home, the web had completely changed. JavaScript took over. Like back
When
in
was
the
this?
What's that?
When was this? Like what years?
2000 to 2002.
Okay.
Um, Before you could, right click, view source, and like learn how people made the website, and that's how you figured things out. After I got back from Boston, you'd view source, and it was just like crazy JavaScript stuff all over the place.
Sure.
And so I was like, oh, okay, I guess the web's not for me anymore either.
Huh.
Yeah. So anyway, went to college, got a degree in economics, did a ton of stuff with spreadsheets, and I still kind of consider spreadsheets my first programming language. I would do some pretty interesting stuff with VLOOKUP and HLOOKUP, and I'd set up all these sheets that were, now that I look back, they were just databases with rows. And yeah, when you make a really intricate spreadsheet, it's not really a different mindset or a different problem set than programming. So let me think what's next. So yeah, I was doing tons of spreadsheets for my degree, and then I started selling life insurance and mutual funds and other securities. And yeah, it was a sales job, but I got to screw around in Excel with my spreadsheets a lot when I was proposing things to my clients. And so I'd forecast stuff out 30 years, and I'd use historical data from the S&P 500, and there's some pretty intricate spreadsheets. And then
was that just like a job? Like you just graduated and were like, I need a job, so I'll do this, or was that a thing you wanted to do? The sales stuff.
So I was in a little town in Idaho, in Rexburg, and there wasn't really anything to do there, like for work. And my wife still had a couple of years left on her degree. And so I was looking around, what can I do here in Idaho that'll make at least a decent amount of money that wasn't just going to a call center. I mean, that was basically it. I could go work at a call center or I could go sell life insurance.
Okay.
Yeah, so I went and sold life insurance. But yeah, I never really viewed it as a full-time or like a long-term career choice. Yeah, so I was doing that, and my wife needed a website for her photography degree, like an online portfolio, and she's like, hey, didn't you used to do websites or something? And I just kind of laughed. I'm like, oh yeah, a long time ago. And she goes, well, I need one for my to get my degree. And I was like, okay, let's see if we can figure out how to do this. So I got back into it, and I was having fun. I was just pulling down stuff from, I actually had no clue what was going on. It was during the Ajax and the Selector Wars time. So what is this, 2005 or so?
Sure.
So I would have MooTools and Scriptaculous and Prototype on the page at the same time, and MooTools and Scriptaculous or MooTools and Prototype didn't work on the same page, and I'm like, why doesn't this work
anymore? Yeah, they'd all like overwrite the same prototypes.
Yeah, and like if I switched the order of which one I put on the page first, different features would work and different ones would break. Yeah, I was just copy pasting stuff I could find on forums and whatever else. But then I actually, this is a funny part. I was trying to figure out, okay, once I figured out that I couldn't use both of them, it's like you can only use Scriptaculous or MooTools. Which one do you want? And so I was like, okay, how do I pick? Because I have no clue about the technical merits of any of these.
Sure.
And I have no experience to figure this out. The only thing I knew was that the W3C had an HTML validator. So I was like, I'll go to mootools.net and I'll go to Scriptaculy.us. Their website address is one of those funny ones.
Yeah.
And I'll plug those into the HTML validator, and whichever one has the fewest errors, I'm going to trust them the most. And so I picked Moo Tools
Oh my gosh.
because they validated. Then I heard about jQuery and I went to their website. Their website didn't validate either. But like it was the only rule I knew to follow. So, like it was the only way that I could have some metric to be like, okay, I bet these guys care more about their code than these other ones.
Where did the idea come from? Like
I don't
someone
know.
just told you that validating stuff was important at
You,
some point, or like,
yeah, you're a brand new developer and you're reading articles and blogs and stuff. And at that time, it was really cool to like drop a little button at the bottom of your
oh
website.
yeah, you had those little images that were like validates, and
Exactly.
yeah,
Yeah, valid
yeah,
HTML5 or XHTML and valid CSS and whatever.
yeah,
And, when you're a brand new developer kind of learning on your own, I don't like the word self-taught because everyone who posted articles and things taught me. I guess self-directed learning.
sure.
Um, when that's how you're figuring things out, like you just have to kind of grab onto weird stuff like that. I sometimes
Yeah,
think
there's
about
like
people.
there's like some random strong opinion that somebody has, and that's the one blog post you read, and you're like, oh, okay,
Yeah,
that's the right way.
yeah, and you like what
Yeah,
else can you go on?
yeah,
Um,
huh.
I can't even imagine today with all the different build tools and like frameworks and everything else going on, what it would be like to like if the current landscape of today is what I had back then. Like I don't know. I don't know what would have happened.
Yeah. It seems pretty easy to get paralyzed. So many people that are just like, everyone else besides me is wrong, and here's why, and
Yeah.
also buy my ebook.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm one of those people. I'm a trainer. Like and so it's so hard to balance that like my opinions versus stuff that's going to help my business versus letting people know that
Sure.
this is actually I don't can yeah, it's a weird spot. That's why we try to still
So
be really involved with open source.
you mentioned you had that early experience with the C++ book, and you've ended up kind of in a teaching role since then. Do you think that affected how you teach at all? Where you tried to learn and it was just like this weird, frustrating experience? Do you think that gave you more, I don't know, more empathy for people trying to learn things?
I don't know, maybe. Um when I was in college, I was a TA and I taught a class that was called supplementary instruction.
Hmm.
So I was a supplementary instructor for all the econ courses. And econ is a tough topic for a lot of people. Seems like you either
Hmm.
get it or you don't. And and so while teaching economics, I tried really hard to be creative and kind of like bring it to the level that people were at.
Hmm.
I remember very consciously trying to do that kind of thing, um, and like trying to relate the ideas of economics to just everyday life stuff that they made decisions about. Um, And yeah, when I think about that C++ book, it was just like type this stuff and then the thing will work.
Hmm.
And in our workshops, that's not how we do it. It's not like, hey, I'm going to code this and you code it along with me and we're all going to build an app together.
Sure.
Which is I know how some workshops go. For me, it's learning. You gotta to really learn. You gotta be thrown in the fire a little bit. Like you've got to have to think through these problems, and you have to hit brick walls and like not know what the next step is, and kind of like spend that time, that mental energy, exploring and trying to think. Okay, well, how can I solve this? And maybe you come to a solution, maybe you don't. Uh, and then after you've been through that kind of little trial, um, when we get back up there and we present a solution to the problem, I think it clicks and it makes a lot more sense because you've already been able to wrap your head around the problem really well.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, so I don't know if there's a direct correlation there, but if now that you asked the question, I think back on it, maybe there was. I just wasn't aware of it. But yeah,
Sure.
yeah, we also give out code that like already runs, and then the job
Hmm.
is make it do something new instead of here's an empty thing, start typing.
Sure.
Yeah, which is how our jobs are, you know.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's way easier to come into a code base and add a feature in some ways than it is to just start at a blank page. And
Yeah, and very few of us actually start with a blank page.
yeah, and
Like, how often do you start a brand new app if you are employed?
yep.
Um, yeah,
So one more question I had. When you were talking about the approach where you kind of present the problem, let people struggle, do you notice? I assume there's kind of a mix of people who are experienced developers who are new to React and people that are just newer to development in the trainings. Is that true?
Say that again. The audio kind of cut out on me.
So is there in your trainings, is there kind of a mix of people who are experienced but newer to React and then people that are just newer to development in general?
So we send out a pre-training questionnaire, and the first question has 5 options, which are what's your experience with React? And the options are I've never touched it, I've played
Mm-hmm.
with it at home, um, I'm doing it at work, but I haven't shipped anything to production, I've shipped React code to production, and then the last one is I could probably run the workshop. And we'll get one or two people every now and then the answer that they could run the workshop. But yeah, every workshop we have people from every single one of those categories.
Mm-hmm.
So as far as React experience goes, they're all over the board. And then there's a question about JavaScript. I think we phrase it. What is your please rate your confidence with using JavaScript? And most people put around 7.5 to 8. There's kind of like a perfect Bell distribution around 7.5 out of 10, where 10 is you read the spec for fun, and 0 is you don't know anything about JavaScript.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, but actually in practice, I don't know what 7.5 means as far as JavaScript experience.
Sure.
But that's where most people rate themselves. But in the workshops, React gets out of your way so fast, and just gives JavaScript right back to you. We joke sometimes that our workshop is actually like 50% or even 75% just talking about JavaScript.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people haven't mapped and filtered an array. They don't know that every is a method on the array prototype. Not super comfortable with JavaScript expressions, which once you get into JSX, if you have mastery over JavaScript expressions, you can be really expressive in your JSX. If you haven't mastered expressions, it gets kind of clunky inside of your JSX. You're like, how do I do this? Where do I do that?
Sure. Do you notice a difference between the way people learn in the workshop from people that are maybe experienced developers but newer to React and people that are just where everything is kind of new to them?
I don't know.
Well, when you talked about your approach of throwing people at problems and then you kind of let them struggle and then present a solution, it just seems like, I don't know, hopefully that's something that you get more comfortable with the more experience you get as a developer. And even though you're not you might not figure out the solution because you're new to the technology, you maybe are comfortable with that feeling of like, how do I do this thing? I don't really know, let me try and figure it out. Whereas if you're newer to the development, maybe that's, I don't know, I'm just kind of spitballing here, maybe that's a more uncomfortable feeling to you.
Yeah. I don't know that we have a whole lot of people that are new to development generally.
Okay.
We've given a couple scholarships to people who have just graduated from like code schools and stuff, and some of them have done really great. Other ones have sort of like, yeah. Now that you mention that, you can kind of tell that they're like that they haven't experienced that yet.
Yeah, like it can feel a little bit more like failure maybe if you're like, I can't figure this out.
Yeah.
And I can't figure stuff out all the time. I'm used to that.
Yeah.
It's part of my job.
Yeah.
So kind of skipping over a few years. So you got into MooTools, you got more into front end stuff, and then you got into React. Can you talk about what attracted you to React?
So when I first, I was doing a lot of Backbone, and we were using handlebars templates with it. And I kept like trying to figure out, even back in MooTools, I was trying to, when I was doing MooTools, I think it was from Dojo where I got the idea, and some of the MooTools devs, I can't remember how it got put in my head, but this declarative idea where you can just put some data attributes on your elements, and then when the JavaScript lands, it just dresses everything up and like brings everything to life just by declaring a couple of things. And you can even go to my GitHub profile and see my it's called element filters in MooTools, and it's a React component. And I was kind of doing that, and then I was in Backbone with handlebars, and I was trying to figure out how can we like make these templates more expressive. How can we like have this idea of and I didn't have a word for it, but it was a component. And then I got to Ember, and we had the model view controller thing going on. And I remember talking to Yehuda saying, hey, I really want to just build like I don't want to have a model and a view and a controller and a template. I kind of just want one concept for just a chunk of reusable code, a little UI widget, some sort of control. And he's like, yeah, I've been working on this thing called control actually in Ember. And we had a couple of conversations, and then realized with a small hack in Ember, you could just set the views controller to itself, and then you had a thing called a component. And Yehuda kept working on that and ended up shipping Ember.component. And I loved that thing, and actually started using it for everything. When I was speaking at EmberConf, I was going to be talking about components, and I showed Yehuda some code, and I was, hey, look what I'm doing. And in Ember, you've got your route and your controller and your view. And I would just assign all of that to the same component. Like everything was this component. And he was like, maybe don't talk about that at the conference. And I was like, well, no, like it's all it is. Like, why do we have a route and a controller and a view? Like, it's all the same thing. I'm here. And anyway, now they have routable components in Ember, which is basically exactly that. So I've always loved this idea of, I've got some piece of my user interface. How can I wrap it up into like a nice little ball and put it anywhere in my app? And so when I got my hands on React, it just immediately clicked for me. I was like, this is the thing. Like, this is the thing I've been looking for my entire career. Since I was actually able to think about code in any sort of abstract way and building UI, I've been searching for this abstraction, these components.
Sure.
So I think that's what got me really excited about React.
Cool. I feel like you have a certain style of conference talk where it's very, you just kind of like pull open an editor and like you have some web page with a bunch of demos on it, and you just like show off cool stuff. Is that kind of what you're thinking about doing with your React Rally talk, or do you want to talk a little bit about what your plans are there?
Yeah, I think that's what I'd like to do. With the workshop and all this traveling, we speak at a lot of meetups. Like we've spoken at meetups from Sydney, Australia to Vancouver, BC to London, New York. Like we've been all over the world talking to people about React. And it's, man, how do I put this? It's like, I feel like we aren't all totally getting what we can do with these components. And so I think that's what I'll be talking about. I've got some rough ideas, but yeah, I really just want to show off, not just like React is cool. Like I gave that talk at ReactConf a year and a half ago, and just showed off a bunch of things that were hard for me before that I was able to do really well in React.
Sure.
And I think it'll probably be similar in that it's like, check out what you can do with these components. Like here's some stuff that you've maybe not thought about. And I hope I can just kind of help a lot of people get more out of their components and maybe think a little bit differently about what you can do with React. Redux and MobX and Relay and GraphQL and all these other things are awesome technologies. But you don't see a whole lot of people just talking about really awesome components and what it means to be declarative with these components. And so I hope to, I just hope to what's the word I'm looking for? Just inspire people to think, to give a little bit more weight to their components and not just think of them as dumb templates.
That's interesting that you talk about that, because that's the thing that React talks about, but it's still basically every other kind of development you do feels like it's kind of encouraging you down a different paradigm or different path. So it can be kind of tempting to just try and do the same stuff you do in other coding in React. And
Yeah.
I think that's a cool idea, that you actually do things differently in React because of the way it works, instead of just like use it to add some JavaScript to your page, whatever.
Right. Yeah. So I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I think a
Cool.
lot of people are going to, at the beginning, be like, you're nuts. And then hopefully at the end be like, that's awesome.
Yeah.
But we'll see.
The thought leader's journey.
Oh, geez. No. Thought haver. I'm a thought haver.
Yeah. I'm excited for it. It sounds really cool. And you give great talks, so I think it'll
Thanks.
be really good. Well, thank you for your time, Ryan. If people want to find out more about you or check up on what you're doing, where can they do that?
They could just, probably my Twitter handle, just Ryan Florence. You can get some of my thought having there. And then from there on my profile is a link to our company's website, React.js-training.com. And there we list out all the public workshops that we have coming up. Like we'll be in South Carolina, and then probably in Phoenix, and then we're always going to San Francisco and New York and Boston, like every quarter it seems. So yeah, you can keep up with us there.
Cool. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, thanks, Jameson.
We'll see you at the conference.
See ya.